ambush! It's a trap! Kill them! We're surrounded!
This doesn't go a million miles an hour in terms of pacing, and the plot isn't necessarily a riveting concept for this point in the series, but for the adults in the room, it's a fascinating insight into an indigenous culture's perception of the war and how they choose to live among it. It introduces a recently returning character to the Star Wars franchise and provides a new change of aesthetic to our characters and their surroundings.
Well, this sucks.
Before I get too entrenched in what I feel about this episode and what it teaches us, let's break down what happens, as I imagine, like me, a lot of you have forgotten. We open on the Republic arriving to the planet Orto Plutonia after their local base has stopped transmitting. Obi-Wan and Anakin are accompanied by Captain Rex, C-3PO, R2, and Chairman Cho of Pantora, who brings Ryo Chuchi, the representative in the Senate, to investigate the unresponsive base. Chairman Cho demands to understand what's happening and if there are any separatist invaders on world, as Pantora supposedly claims this planet due to its close proximity and it being reportedly uninhabited, so therefore is unaligned, making it free for the picking, I guess. Chuchi reinforces this sentiment and that it is in fact the protectorate for Orto Plutonia and they have a duty to this world, and that the Seppies have no claim over it. Obi-Wan and the clones check out the base before allowing everyone inside and discover the bodies of the men and their helmets being left on spikes as a sign of honour for the departed and a warning to anyone else. They discover a separatist base not far from theirs, and bizarrely the droids have been aligned in a very similar fashion. Obi-Wan activates the communications table inside to discover a creature attack the droids. Cutting back to Cho and Chuchi, we see an immediate disparity between them both and their attitudes towards the situation, where Cho presents a hostile and defensive attitude with little concern for the dead men around him, whereas Chuchi feels empathetic to the carnage involved and is able to determine that this wasn't the work of the separatists. Cho belittles her for this assumption and goes on to state that he's willing to fight and die for his people, and questions her integrity and whether she'd do the same, as she'd prefer to find a peaceful resolution to the matter. Cutting back to Anakin and Obi-Wan, who discover a shimmer off in the distance, they stumble upon a native tribe to the planet called the Tulls. After meeting with them and discussing their position in this, they report back to base, where Cho accuses them of trespassing, but Obi-Wan determines that they're too primitive and not advanced enough to yet master space travel. Cho refuses to accept this assessment and that there are natives to this world, and starts to rant about how they belong to the people of Pantora, as this planet does as well, and they must be dealt with like the savages they are. Cho starts trying to pull rank in the matter and demands that the Jedi remain impartial, as this is an internal affair for them, but he wants to use Rex and his men against the Tulls. Anakin and Obi-Wan remind him repeatedly that they only want peace, as does Chuchi, but he dismisses these claims and states that he'll resolve this in his own way. They venture out to the arranged spot, and Cho starts waving his dick around again, demanding that people do what he says. However, Taizen beat him to it and had his men follow them. Cho addresses Taizen in a confrontational manner, which provokes the chieftain to ask that they leave once more, or it will become war between them. Anakin suggests that Chuchi finds someone to make an interventional plea to the Senate that will allow her to make negotiations on Pantora's behalf. Meanwhile, Cho engages the Tulls, dragging Rex and his men into the fray, and Rex kicks ass in the best way possible. But during the melee, Cho is struck by a spear, and Rex and a few of his men manage to get away, but reach an impasse, and they quickly have to fight what's after them. The growing numbers of natives, however, steadily become a little overwhelming, but at the last second, Rex and the remaining men are saved when Chuchi and the crew arrive. Chuchi is granted the authority to negotiate peaceful settlements between Pantora and the Tulls, and she asks the Jedi initially to do it on her behalf, but they press her to do it as a show of good faith for the Tulls. Cho succumbs to his injuries and dies, with Chuchi promising peace. She comes to an arrangement with the Tulls to remain as protectors over Orto Plutonia, and after removing speech, they go their separate ways. We close out on Obi-Wan asking that she remains as an example to how every senator should respond to matters like this in the future. So this is without a doubt a mature and nuanced viewing experience to come from the first season that explores a delicate topic of colonization and the rights of an indigenous species that have presumably been on this world long before Cho was even around. This is a rather complex concept for a show like this, and likely would have gone over a lot of kids' heads, as it is a rather politically driven plot that throws into question the true effect of governance and sovereignty. Chairman Cho is given the visual presence of being an antagonist to help children understand, but for adults watching this, we see that he's a bigoted character with an elitist approach to managing affairs like this, and that the rights of the Tulls have very little meaning in his eyes in this instance, as it disrupts the very existence of Pantorans in his eyes. His almost nihilistic beliefs against the Tulls are particularly disturbing to witness, as you forget for a second through all the political talk that he's aligned with the Republic Senate. You know, the supposed good guys in the war. The sentiments expressed by the Republic are often the rights of everyone being acknowledged and accounted for, free from prejudice and occupation, and embracing the idea of freedom. This is a rather startling discovery, but a good example of the idea that there are heroes on both sides. With what we're presented from Chairman Cho, it makes one wonder what it would have looked like for the Tulls had he aligned with the Separatists. One would assume that Dooku wouldn't hesitate to keep them happy and would press ahead with the extermination of their species, but to see it occur under the flag of the Republic makes it more poignant and something to consider as we step further into the show. He's a narcissist to a degree and a control freak who states that this is all in the interest of Pantora, but we see from the Senator Chuchi and the Speaker of Assembly that they would rather embrace the idea of peace before turning to violence. Brian George must be given credit for the performance he gives as Chairman Cho in this. It's fierce, believable, and exudes the arrogance that the character is written to have. It's not often that you can say that something is perfectly casted, but this is one of those examples, and I'd be interested to see this character return again in the future in something like the Tales of the Jedi, as you could have the character come back prior to these events and explore his character just a little bit more, and maybe provide some insight into who he is and whether he possessed these feelings before now. Anyway, moving on, Senator Chuchi, a character who recently made her on-screen return after a little over a decade away in the latest season of The Bad Batch. She possesses a natural prowess for a job like this and is clearly effective in getting through to people, as proven here and later with the likes of Senator Batoni and Clone Trooper Slip in The Bad Batch, to assist in her efforts for equal rights for the clones. However, right now at least, she's a little more insecure and does try to approach the Jedi over handling this affair, but she manages to broker peace between two worlds, two cultures that otherwise would have ended up at war with each other, with one side becoming decimated due to their primitive nature, and delivers the result that everyone wanted, as she steadily evolves from this vulnerable young woman to a powerhouse stand-in for Padme, and almost achieves the impossible for the clones in the latest season had it not been for Papa Palps getting involved, and is continuing to be an example that Obi-Wan wanted her to be. I enjoyed revisiting this episode after having just had a return in the newest season and having witnessed the maturity she's undergone. Now the next talking point is without a doubt the Tulls. To see a tribe of natives prove to be more effective than specially trained soldiers and programmed BattleBots is actually rather amusing, and particularly fascinating as you wonder how they managed to tackle both sides without incurring any casualties. Obi-Wan mentions throughout this that they wish to be left in peace. They don't seek revenge as the clones were just caught in the middle of it after the droids tried to invade their territory, and that they're not intending to make enemies from this. The honorary graves, the bowing, and their resourceful measures show that they might not be as advanced, but they are a cultured species who respect traditions. The honorary graves, the bowing, and resourceful measures show that they might not be advanced, but they're a cultured species who respect traditions, bestow honor even on the enemy, and have mastered their tactics in a way that puts the clones to shame. The fact that Cho disrespects them and undermines their capabilities likely allowed them to execute their moves even more proficiently, and proves that they would have won this fight even before Chuchi drew a line in the sand. The use of the Jedi as negotiators must have been a wet dream for Obi-Wan in this situation, as he's nicknamed the Master Negotiator for his gift of gab and polite mannerisms that make it easy for people to accept his ideas. To even see Anakin embracing this practice was a sight for sore eyes, and like the last two episodes showed for his understanding of peace and the interpretation that that idea takes from various communities, it furthers the maturity for his character, which is a primary example of why this series is necessary. To also see Rex and the clones respond to this sentiment and only go on the defensive shows their subtle understanding of the situation around them, despite how much of a tool Cho deems them to be. The visuals were excellent and in some ways still hold up even even now. The desolate but glistening lands of Auto Plutonia were beautiful and provided a nice shift in landscapes for the show, as everywhere we'd seen prior to this was harsh, dilapidated environments that began with or would eventually end up looking a certain way. The musical motifs aligned perfectly with the tone of this episode and situations that played out on screen. Nothing felt particularly out of place, and overall the character developments we see were perfect. And like I said at the start, this story might not have been for everybody, but for those looking for a thought-provoking and deep installment, you'll have a good time. And with a great deal of hindsight, I would actually recommend this episode to anyone interested. That's going to do it from me for now though. I appreciate you stopping by. Leave a like on this and don't forget to subscribe for more down the road. And until next time everybody, take care and may the Force be with you.